Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. This podcast is brought to you by Access Nutrients. If you routinely consume foods made from grains, beans, nuts, seeds, or soy, you may unknowingly be ingesting large amounts of phytate, an anti-nutrient that pulls zinc, iron, calcium, and magnesium out of your body. For anyone struggling with digestion, energy, sleep, or micronutrient deficiencies like iron deficiency, anemia, consider giving Access Nutrients a try. This digestive enzyme will break down the phytate in your food and give your body access to the micronutrients otherwise locked up and unavailable to you. They've already had incredible success with elite athletes struggling with iron absorption and energy. Check out some of the incredible testimonials and research on their site to learn more at accessnutrients.org and use the code FTLR for 10% off your first order. Welcome back. I have Amy Puzey joining me on the podcast today. Amy, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Oh, it's really nice to talk to you. Thanks for having me on.
For sure. You are joining Rare Air, where you and Jacob are joining Megan and David Roche as the only married couple that has that has both been on the podcast.
That's great.
Yeah, so it was fun chatting with Jacob back in the summer. We dove into what it's like to be a race director and teacher and all those good things that he's done in 2020. And I'm excited to chat with you. So first question, who is Amy?
I am a mother and a wife, a runner, a holistic nutritionist, national race director for 5 Peaks, and have just sort of dove into a startup and writing a book.
I love it. So we got connected originally through 5 Peaks, which is a nationwide trail running series in Canada. Is that correct?
It is, yeah.
Awesome. So I definitely want to dive into that, but let's sort of set the stage with you as a runner. So do you remember your first run?
It was probably, I think probably grade 1. There was like a little running club that I joined at the school. I'm trying to remember. That was probably it. Pretty young.
And between now and then, you've run quite a few miles and kilometers and all that good stuff. So what did that journey look like to get from then to where you are today?
Which
is a loaded question, but we can start with the basics.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Canmore, which is a little mountain town in Canada. And so I think I did a little bit of running, grade 1 or through school. But I didn't really start running until I was trying to stay in shape for swim club. So I used to do summer swim club, and then I started running through the winter, just I think, a kilometer or 2 at a time to try to cross train through the winter. And from there, I believe when I was about 14, my phys ed teacher was a really big runner, and I always really idolized her, and I thought it'd be really cool to be able to run like her. And she took me out on I'd been sort of doing 5 or 10K around town. She took me out on a really hard half marathon run once, and I think I almost died, but it also made me want to just run more. And so that's where it all began. When I started, I don't even think I could run a kilometer without stopping. But this is a pretty beautiful place to run. So I ran through high school, and then I ran for the University of Alberta while I was at school there. And yeah, it's just sort of always stayed with me. I think I've tried to quit a few times, but it's just
what keeps you coming back?
Probably just the way that I feel like that it just gives me energy. It's been a pretty constant through my life, but it's definitely changed. I think when I was in high school, it might have been a bit of an outlet. And then later on in life, it was just more of a gift to myself that I thought was really important for sort of day-to-day health. I'd say right now it's definitely mental health through all of this, and just stress relief. But it's been really fun to compete and to get to know people from all over the world through running races and different community groups, and it's brought so much to my life.
I love that, and I definitely agree. I think that people make the community for sure, or make the community so awesome. Mm-hmm. So where did 5 Peaks come from?
So 5 Peaks was something when I was just finishing high school. I don't even remember how I got to the first race, but there was one at the Nordic Center here, and because when I went running, I just went into the woods behind our house, which is sort of Nordic Center trails, and I didn't ever really run on the road just because the trails were right there. So that's where I went.
Right. Why would you when you've got that?
Yeah. And I don't remember even thinking it was trail running. I think I just went running. I didn't have a phone. I never took bear spray. I never told anyone where I was going. And that was probably 14 or 15. And then there was a race up at the Nordic Center, a 5 Peaks race. And I thought I should probably try this. And I fell in love with it. I loved the race directors. It was a really nice couple from Calgary. And there were races all over the place. And so I kind of raced 5 Peaks, I'd say, on and off for 5 or 10 years. And then, so I think it's been around since about 98, but it wasn't something that I was involved in until 2013 from a work perspective, or as the national race director.
And then how did that come about?
So I had done the Trans Rockies run in 2010 and 2011, and the owner lives in Calgary, which is just an hour away from me. And I started putting on some trail running camps for Trans Rockies. We did one in Hawaii and one in Canmore, like a women's retreat in Canmore. And I think through that, I somehow contacted Catherine, who was the previous national race director, and started chatting with her about it. And at the time I was a holistic nutritionist. And so I asked her, tell me about 5 Peaks and how it works, because I don't think I even understood that race directing was a career or an industry at all. And we started chatting, and I at the time I was offered a position in the clinic that I was working in, and an option to buy into the clinic, and it just wasn't exciting. And the getting involved with 5 Peaks was definitely a bigger risk, but a new challenge. And it was I just felt it was time to switch out of nutrition and into race directing. So it took a few years, but it sort of went from there.
Very cool. Let's talk about 2020. So you started to get involved in 2013. 2020, I can imagine, is a challenging year to be a race director. Yeah. First, what did you do first when things started shifting?
So I think back to March, it's probably a little bit like childbirth. Like it happens so quickly. You don't remember anything, and no one's sleeping, and it's just really high stress. We lost our day home. So the kids were all home, with us at that time. And then everything started to fall apart. And there were a lot of discussions with the team. So I have a really great team of race directors, and they've been with us for anywhere from 5 to 8 years. And so we all know each other really well, but no one knew what to do. Like, there's no playbook for this, and we didn't know when to make the call. And we're watching other event directors and what they're doing and when they're canceling races. And what their refund policies were. And it was just so unprecedented, as with most industries. But yeah, definitely very high stress, and having all the kids at home and trying to entertain teenagers and toddlers was was fun. In some days we're minus 30 here. So we just had a lot of discussions. I talked to a lot of other race directors to try to get a sense of what they were doing. There was no real industry collaboration at that point, or any formal groups that were talking, whereas now there are, which is really great to see all the event directors collaborating and trying to help each other.
What does that look like?
One that I've been a part of is just the Alberta race directors. And so we've been talking a lot and trying to lobby the government for support, for funding, for understanding that if they're going to allow a 2,500 person farmers market that's largely indoors, can they understand the need to get back to a 500 person event outdoors where we can socially distance, And I think it's just sort of overlooked because it's not an airline. It's not restaurants. It's just a smaller industry. But it's just nice to have the support of other race directors to talk through, what is your policy around transfers and refunds and virtual racing, and it's just nice to work together on it.
And so how did you continue to evolve as the year went on?
So we decided to do a virtual option for 2020. So the way that Five Peaks works is that there are 5 races each year. So it kind of starts in April or May, depending on the region. And there's one a month all the way through to September or October. And we have 4 core regions in Canada that we operate out of. And so we gave people the option of either transferring to 2021, 100% transfer, or to do the virtual option this year. And a lot of people really wanted the virtual option because they wanted a reason to keep training and to stay engaged and, go into their local running store to pick up their swag and see people, and they needed something to motivate them. We also developed the Great Canadian Crossing, which is a running, riding, or run-ride combo, or a multi-sport option where you can log your kilometers across Canada over the course of a year, or you can just choose one province. And we've got some really fun medals. And that's been really cool because people from all over Canada who wouldn't necessarily be able to come to one of our in-person events have been able to participate in that, from all over the country and all over the world too. So that's given people who don't necessarily even like going to races or competing, it's given them something to work towards and log their mileage. So those were kind of our 2 pivots. We've done some online swag sales because a lot of it had already been purchased. And so my garage is full of hoodies and hats and beanies and all sorts of stuff, as our storage facilities, because we'd already purchased everything. So we've been trying to move some of that. But overall, we've had incredible support from the trail running community. And compared to other race directors that I've talked to, I only had one real jerk. And most people were just really wonderful and appreciative, which was nice. I don't know that I could have handled too much abuse in the middle of all of that.
What do you wish people knew about what you're doing in 2020 as a race director that they probably don't know?
I think that there's a general misconception about race directing that you kind of just show up like the day before and put some flags down and put a race on and then you're done. And Five Peaks is a full-time job that I do year round. And so probably just the amount of work that goes into putting on an event and the number of people involved and the volunteers. And it's sort of death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's just like tiny, tiny, tiny little details that you have to coordinate all over the place.
And so how does your own running fit into that? Are you ever running the races, or are you too busy on race day?
I don't ever run my own races. I'm usually getting pulled in 1,000 different directions and putting out fires. Sometimes I'll purposely, if I go to one of the races, I obviously can't get to all of them in Canada, but if I go, I'll sometimes just go out on course to one of the aid stations, just so that I'm not in the start finish area getting pulled in different directions. So I don't run my own races, but I still try to race a little bit. Definitely not as much as I used to, but I usually choose 1 or 2 races a year to try to do. This summer I did my first 100K, but it wasn't a race. It was just a fundraiser for Tommy, and it was just sort of loops around Canmore. But it was a fun challenge.
Yeah, the number of people that were doing things like that was mind-blowing, in terms of raising awareness and support and dollars for Tommy and for your family. What did it feel like to see, what was it, $1 million raised by the community, or almost that?
Yeah. I mean, it was mind-blowing. I think not only the money, because it gave people something to do or to give when they could run, and they could give money, right? When they feel like they wanted to reach out and help. But I think just the collective energy that went towards him, the prayers, and the thoughts, and I think that's a huge piece of why he's doing as well as he is now.
Yeah, it's amazing the impact that one single person can have on tens of thousands of people. And I can't imagine what it would have been like for him to acknowledge for the first time, like, look at all these people that care so much.
Yeah, especially because he was asleep through a lot of that, right? Or unconscious. So yeah, I don't know what it was like to wake up. I know Jake took a lot of the posts down from his Instagram because he didn't want Tommy to get upset with how much he had been posting about it. So as soon as Tommy got his phone back, Jake deleted his posts.
That's so funny.
I think mostly because, he wouldn't, the way Jake explains it is that he just wouldn't want people doing that much for him when he knows there are others in need.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's, I don't know, it's I've talked a lot about Tommy and Peter Bromka as like two of the male pillars in the road running space. I know he runs trails also, but like the way that the two of them in their own ways shared their struggles and experiences training for the Olympic trials, it was just so cool to see. And then it makes sense that, people care that much.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just so nice when people can be real about struggles instead of, my life is perfect and my kids are perfect and my job is perfect. Like, nobody wants to.
I think that's the like, we were talking about silver linings. That's like one of the big silver linings from 2020, that when you ask somebody, how are you doing? It's like, you can't really expect them to actually be good.
Yeah.
Today, I had a conversation on the podcast with Tina Mir a couple of weeks ago. And when I asked, how are you doing? She said, everything. And I was like, that's it. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Because some days things are great and other days it's total shit. And you can have all of that all at once. And I feel like we're all riding this roller coaster. And when we were talking prior to the podcast, you were asking, how am I doing? And I was like, well, I'm bored. Basically, I've got, work, I've got podcasting, and I've got running, and I don't do much outside of that. On the flip side, you've got a bunch of kids, you've got, family, you've got this, you've got that, and you probably want some of that free time. And it's like, everybody's dealing with something these days. And I think that's highlighting the fact that like that's actually always been true, but it's a little more acute these days.
Yeah, and I think one of the main purposes we have as humans is just to be here for each other. And so if we can help each other through this stuff, that's why we're here. Like a few of my friends recently have just sort of gone really quiet, and you kind of have to drag them out. They're single, they live alone, and they're just getting really lonely, and they just try to tough it out on their own. And you ask them how they're doing, and they're like, "Oh, I'm great, doing lots of running." But that's not true.
Right.
And you got to drag them out for a walk and like, how are you really doing? Yeah, it's been really nice to have honest answers instead of, yeah, everything's great. Because
Right.
yeah, you're right. Anybody who says that right now, they're
either short on time or they're not telling the truth.
Yeah.
It's funny. I have this dynamic with Tina where if one of us says good, we know that they're busy and we should expect a full answer later.
Yeah.
Your comment on why are we here is perfect. The last conversation I ever had with my grandfather, he basically told me, he's like, the meaning of life is to leave this place in a better position than when you entered.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he was talking about that in relation to our family and building a family and being proud of, being the patriarch and what he had created, which is empathy, care, love, and compassion amongst our family and togetherness and closeness and whatever. And he said, I can go knowing that I've done my job. And I just love that so much. And I completely agree with what you said and what he said. And in this world that we're in now, I think that's more important than ever before.
Yeah. He sounds like an amazing grandfather. Lots of wisdom.
Yes. Lots of wisdom. Yeah, I feel connected to him when I run these beautifully long races or distances and things like that. And being out in nature is a cool way to reconnect with him and with something that feels bigger than myself. Switching gears a little bit, or a lot of bit. You mentioned that you're a holistic nutritionist.
Yeah.
So that is a, I guess, useful component as a runner. So first, how did that become an interest of yours?
I was at school at U of A, and I had chosen to go into nursing, and I had to work through university, and so I was working at a little health food store on campus, and just started learning a lot about nutrition from the people that I worked with. And I mean, my dad had always sort of been interested in it and taught us little bits, but I learned a lot while I was working at that store. And then I think just watching on my medicine rotation, watching the disease process and the number of medications people were on and didn't even know what they were taking, and starting to learn how disease can be prevented through, or many diseases can be prevented through sound nutrition, and just how little attention people actually give nutrition, and how little it's a part of the medical community. I remember the day, I think one of my patients had just died, and it was like C. diff, and so he basically died of diarrhea. He'd been in isolation. And another patient I had that had Crohn's and was just drinking these awful Ensure drinks all day, and just nothing was getting better. And I had sort of had a bit of a discussion with my prof about it, and she's like, "No, this is the protocol. This is what we do. this is Ensure, it's milk and oil and vitamins, and that's all they need. And just watching people just get sicker and sicker. And I remember the day I called my dad and I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't be a part of this part of medicine. I want to be on the preventative side. He got really mad at me. He told me to stay in school. And I said, I want to go into nutrition. And he said, no, you got to finish this first and you can do something after that. And I said, I can't even be a part of this anymore. And I'd loved like obstetrics, and that was a really neat part of it. But I had just wanted to switch into being on the other side of it. And so I didn't listen to him, and I made a decision to switch. And it was the best thing I've ever done. It was really scary, and it was hard to do and hard to go against what your parents want. But I was also paying for my own education. So I figured at that point I'm just going to make this call.
Sometimes you just got to take the jump.
Yep.
So fast forward to today, you have a company with a supplement, or actually, can you tell me about it rather than me try and butcher the explanation?
Of course. Yeah. So it's research that's sort of, I've been doing for about 10 years now. And it just finally, last summer, so 2019, it just became something that I had to do something with. I didn't really know what to do with it for a long time, or how to get it out there. And I tried a few different ideas, and it had gone through, there was a trial at the Canadian Trials Network for HIV/AIDS patients. And we finally just turned it into a supplement, basically, and brought it to market. And so I'm learning a lot. I've never started a company, but it's an enzyme called phytase, and it helps to break down an anti-nutrient called phytate, which is present on all beans, grains, nuts, and seeds, and all of the products made from those foods. So like peanut butter, anything with flour in it, any cereals, chickpeas, a number of foods, obviously with seeds or anything. And so what it does is it helps the body absorb zinc, iron, calcium, and magnesium, which are all critical to health and the immune system.
What was the process for getting that off the ground?
Basically just me being stubborn. I had a lot to learn. It was finding a company to do the encapsulation, designing label, jumping through all the hoops. We're still working on that with Health Canada. So it's currently only being sold in the US. And then, just setting up the website, posting studies, and just sort of trying to get the word out to largely athletes. That's a lot of the connections that I have, obviously. And but it's a work in progress. It's just self-funded right now, and it's just me kind of doing the work and trying to get it up and running. So I have a lot to learn. I've never worked in this industry before.
What was it like the day it went live?
Oh, that's a good question. It was pretty scary. I mean, to put yourself out there anytime is scary, and you always worry that you've missed something or overlooked something, even though it's been 10 years of this research and talking to professionals all over the place. But of course you always worry. And I think in general, just people not understanding it it's a pretty new concept. Like a lot of people don't even really know what enzymes are, let alone worry about micronutrients in their diet or even, in general. I think people have a decent idea about nutrition, but they don't necessarily understand all the details. So you have to kind of break it down to something digestible for the general public. And there's a lot
intended, of course.
Sorry?
I said, you said digestible for the public.
Yeah.
I said pun intended, of course. Well,
Yeah.
I'm doing my job to try and get people to understand the importance of getting their micronutrient levels in order, and you're doing a great job to help make sure that once they know they're low and they can't they can't get it back up, that there is something that can help fix that. If you know me, you know that I always do my own research and also try everything out before sharing it with you. I've been using Access Nutrients for a while now, and while I can't pin all of my strong workouts and long runs to a single thing, I have been feeling very strong lately and definitely getting what I need out of my food, at least according to my blood work. Check out accessnutrients.org to learn more about their product and research, and use the code FTLR for 10% off your first order. And now back to our conversation. Why are people coming to you? How are they finding you? What's the what are you mainly trying to help people achieve?
I mean, for athletes, iron obviously is really important. And we've had some pretty incredible results with a few elite athletes that had really low iron and ferritin levels, and weren't able to keep their iron high even with infusions. So that's been really an interesting piece, obviously, for athletes and for females that are struggling with iron deficiency anemia. But overall, we've had incredible results with athletes in general, just with recovery and overall energy, better sleep, and then a few specific diseases that have or chronic conditions that have improved with the use of the enzyme.
Very cool. I've been taking it for a month, and my workouts have been fast and my sleep has been great. I don't know what the exact variable is, but I feel pretty damn good.
That's great. Yeah. The sleep piece, definitely with better calcium and magnesium absorption, can be really helpful. And then, as you know, all the micronutrients that just sort of support the whole immune system in general and performance.
For sure. So one of the things that I like to talk about on the podcast is the notion of, or the concept of, balance. And it sounds like you've got, many full-time jobs all packed into one person. How do you manage all of that?
Well, running keeps me sane.
That's a given.
Yeah. And I think Jake and I both, he's even better than me at making sure that always happens. I'm probably more, something comes up with the kids, I'm okay to let my run go. And that's not always the healthiest thing, but I think I try not to get too married to any one outcome. That's been really helpful for me to kind of learn about non-attachment or having any expectations. You kind of, I think as a parent, you just have to go with like flexibility. You can't be rigid on anything, including a run. Like if it's 20 minutes, it's better than nothing. And yeah, if I can get in 90 minutes, that would be incredible, but it just doesn't always happen. So I think balance can come from just not getting attached to any specific idea or outcome.
Yeah, I think that's the whole like process versus outcome debate. So I've had, this will be like episode 130, and probably 100 of the guests are professional or elite athletes. And it's fascinating that like 90% of them care more about the process than the minute details or a specific outcome. And I think that that's remarkably consistent for professionals, but it's totally opposite the majority of amateur runners.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, again, I've sort of reflected on this with other guests, but I think that that's critical. It's a critical distinction. And it's sort of like the chicken and egg. Like, is it because they're doing it to get better results, or they're doing it because they're truly, passionate and it's their job and whatnot? Whereas with amateurs, like I don't know why there is such a discrepancy. Is the process oriented approach what what allows them to be more successful, and the people who are focused on an outcome are less successful? I don't know. Well, but I'm curious to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I definitely think consistency is really important. And even if it is like one thing, Jake helped me. He was coaching me for a few marathons a couple of years ago, and he was really good about like just go out and do a run. Like, don't worry about your pace. Just make sure you are consistent with your training. And it's better to have that consistency and even the slow miles than it is to go out and try to hammer for 45 minutes 4 times a week and just like drive yourself into the ground. I think it's, for me, I've had to learn to make exercise in general a part of my life. It wasn't something that I was raised with. My parents were more kind of weekend warriors. We skied as kids and did a lot of hiking. But it wasn't like something you learn to fit into every day. And even still, they kind of think that I'm crazy to run every day, but it's something that I'm trying to teach my kids, just to move and to sweat as often as possible, but more for overall health, not necessarily. I'm not going to ever pressure them to perform or compete, but it's just for health.
That makes sense. So fast forward 10 years, what are you really proud of accomplishing?
Like in 10 years from now?
Yes.
Yeah.
2030.
I would love to have this enzyme used in developing countries to help with malnutrition and hidden hunger. That would be, that's my dream, is if someone like the Gates Foundation could take this and actually help get it out to people who really need it. I feel like that's sort of my purpose. Aside from being a mother, that's my purpose in life.
I don't want to ask you to, spill the beans and give us the whole business plan, but what are some of the ways you think you're going to help make that dream become a reality?
It's hard to know all the steps, but I feel like it's sort of like, I guess, with running, it's just the consistency and just continue to put the time in. And I think eventually, somehow, the information is going to make it to the person who needs it. So I don't know. I know that this is my part in the journey and the understanding of this enzyme and the immune system. But I don't know who takes it next or where it goes or how it gets to that next level. It's definitely a hope of mine, but I'm sort of just trying to trust that if I do what I'm supposed to do with this information, that it will get into the right hands and then it will get to the people who really need it.
That makes sense. What do you wish people knew about you?
That I'm really shy.
Does that make it hard as a race director?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm definitely an introvert, so I really like being around people, but then I need alone time to sort of not recover, but
recharge.
Recharge. So I love being out at the races, and being around people and hearing their stories and just seeing how happy people are and the connection that is made at races. But yeah, I'm always, I think ever since I was like probably 4 or 5, I've just been a little bit shy.
That's why trail running is so good. You're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Totally solo.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on to chat today. If we want to follow you and all of your amazing endeavors, first, where can we find you?
So I'm on Instagram, amyg.zn, and then Access Nutrients is also on there, and Facebook.
And how about Five Peaks? Where can we find more information on that?
Five Peaks is Five Peaks Run on Instagram and Facebook as well. There are a number of regional groups for Five Peaks as well. That it's actually a really active, fun community, and all through the year, really supportive community up here.
And I guess one last question on that: if somebody listening wants to support a race that they love, what is the best thing for them to do?
I think reaching out to the race directors and letting them know, if you've done one of their races, letting them know what it means to you and how much you love the races. Those messages are always really wonderful to get. So I think if you can support the race director and make them feel like what they're doing has value, that might be worth more than even financial support. But a lot of races now have swag options that are helping to generate a little bit of income, or registering for one of their virtual events if they have that as an option, just until we can get back to in-person racing, I guess.
Very cool. Well, hope to see you out on a mountain out there in Alberta at some point soon. It's on my bucket list, and hopefully soon enough.
Yeah, definitely come up and visit sometime, and we'll take you around the trails here.
I would love that.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jonathan. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, bye.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.